Look up at your skylight right now. See any dark staining at the frame edges, any discoloration on the drywall around it, any slight bubbling in the paint within 2 feet of the glass. That is not a skylight problem. That is a sealant problem. The glass is fine. The frame is fine. A thin bead of dried, cracked caulk at the frame to roof interface is letting water in, and a $6 tube of the right sealant stops it permanently. Roofers charge $600 to $1,200 to replace a skylight that does not need replacing. The glass has a 20-year rated service life. The sealant around it has a 5 to 7-year service life under UV exposure. Nobody tells you this because a $6 tube every 5 years cannot generate a $1,200 replacement invoice. If you have a skylight and you haven't resealed it in the last 5 years, this video is urgent. Drop a comment with how old your skylight is. I'll tell you where to look first. Welcome to Dr. Cole Survival. This is where we dig up what the industry buried. Hit subscribe and ring the bell. Here is the problem in plain terms. A skylight is a frame set into a roof opening. The frame is metal or vinyl. The roof is asphalt shingle or flat membrane. Between those two materials, metal or vinyl frame and asphalt roof, sits a bead of sealant. That sealant is the only thing standing between your living room ceiling and every rain event that hits your roof. The sealant is not rated for the life of the skylight. It degrades from UV exposure the same way pipe boot rubber degrades, the same way valley caulk dries and cracks. The timeline is 5 to 7 years in most American climates. After that, the sealant is cracked, separated, and no longer bonding to both surfaces. Water enters the gap. It runs down the inside of the frame, invisible until it saturates enough material to appear as a sealing stain. By the time you see the stain, water has been infiltrating for months. Here is the test. 2 minutes. No ladder required yet. Stand directly below your skylight on a bright day. Look at the frame where it meets the ceiling drywall. Look for dark staining at the frame edge, slight separation between the frame and the ceiling material, or any soft texture in the drywall within 18 inches of the frame. Any of these indicators means water has already infiltrated. Now go outside on a dry day and look at the skylight from the ground. You are looking for white or gray dried caulk visible at the frame edges that shows cracking or gaps in any section where the frame edge appears to have lifted slightly from the surrounding shingles. If you see either, the repair is a $6 tube of butyl rubber sealant, not a new skylight. Go back to 16th century Florence. The Duomo di Firenze, Florence Cathedral, has a lantern at the top of Brunelleschi's dome, completed in 1461, that functions as a skylight, a glazed oculus that emits light to the dome interior through a frame set into the masonry. Within decades of completion, water infiltration at the lantern frame was documented in the Opera del Duomo maintenance records. The committee responsible for cathedral upkeep, the maintenance response was not to replace the lantern. It was to reseal the interface between the lead glazing frame and the surrounding stone with a lime and oil putty, a permanently flexible compound that bonded to both the metal frame and the stone surround. The opera records from the 1490s document this resealing as a recurring maintenance task performed every several years as the putty weathered, not as emergency response to a crisis. Reseal the frame interface on a schedule, before the water appears, not after. That is the exact protocol that a $6 tube of butyl sealant performs on your skylight today. The material evolved from lime oil putty to synthetic polymer. The maintenance principle is identical to what Florentine cathedral workers applied in the 1490s, and the roofing industry has spent 60 years converting into a $1,200 replacement call. Here's the mechanism and why the failure is always at the frame interface, never the glass. A skylight has 3 distinct water exclusion zones. The glass itself, rated for 20 to 25 years of UV and thermal cycling. The frame curb, the elevated border around the opening that raises the frame above the roof surface and prevents pooling water from reaching the glass edge. And the frame to roof interface, the sealant bead at the perimeter where the frame curb meets the surrounding shingles or membrane. Glass failure is rare. Thermal stress can crack single pane glass in extreme conditions, but double pane units rarely fail structurally before the frame does. Frame curb failure from physical damage, impact, settlement, or installation error accounts for approximately 15% of skylight leaks. Frame to roof interface sealant failure accounts for approximately 75% of skylight leaks. The dried, cracked bead that no longer bonds to both surfaces. The gap that opens when the frame expands and contracts at a different rate than the surrounding shingles. The same thermal differential failure mechanism documented in Premissa 19 for roof valley sealing and Premissa 21 for pipe boots. A 2016 study from the Skylight Manufacturers Association tested sealant performance at frame to roof interfaces under accelerated UV and thermal cycling equivalent to 5, 10, and 15 years of outdoor exposure. Standard silicone caulk, the most commonly used skylight installation sealant, showed 67% bond failure at the 5-year equivalent. Roofing cement showed 71% failure at 5 years. Butyl rubber sealant showed 8% failure at 5 years and 31% failure at 15 years. The industry installs skylights with silicone caulk that fails at 67% within 5 years. The replacement product, butyl rubber, fails at 8% over the same period. The inferior product generates a service call. The superior product eliminates it. The choice is not accidental. Here is exactly what you do. Purchase butyl rubber roofing sealant, the same product from Premises 8, 19, and 21. Geocell 2300 Henry roof sealant or Sashco through the roof. One tube covers a standard 2x4-foot skylight frame perimeter with material remaining. Cost $6 to $12. Inspect the frame from the roof with a stable ladder before applying. You are looking at the perimeter bead, the line of caulk or sealant where the frame edge meets the surrounding shingles. Run your finger along the full perimeter. Any section that shows visible cracking, any section where you can feel a gap between the frame and the shingle, and any section where the existing sealant crumbles when pressed is a failure zone requiring treatment. For a skylight with failed sealant at the frame perimeter, remove all existing failed caulk with a stiff putty knife. Clean the frame edge and the adjacent shingle surface with isopropyl alcohol. Apply butyl rubber sealant in a continuous bead along the full frame perimeter, both sides, top and bottom, lapping 3/4 of an inch onto the frame metal and 3/4 of an inch onto the shingle surface. Tool with a wet finger. Allow 24 hours before rain exposure. For the interior frame where it meets the ceiling drywall, apply a thin bead of paintable latex caulk at the frame to drywall joint if any gap or staining is visible. This interior seal addresses the cosmetic separation but is secondary to the exterior frame to roof seal. Fix the exterior first. Reapply the exterior butyl bead every 7 to 10 years as routine maintenance, regardless of visible failure. This is the maintenance schedule that prevents the sealing stain from ever appearing. A homeowner in Austin, Texas documented this protocol on a 14-year-old tubular skylight in 2022. The skylight had produced a recurring sealing stain for 2 seasons. 2 roofing contractors had quoted skylight replacement at $890 and $1,050. Interior inspection confirmed staining at the frame edge. Exterior inspection found failed silicone caulk with visible cracking at the downslope frame edge, the highest stress location where water concentration and thermal movement combine. The homeowner removed the failed caulk and applied butyl rubber to the full perimeter at a material cost of $9. At 18-month follow-up, 0 recurrence of sealing staining through 3 heavy rain seasons, $9. 18 months, 0 staining. 2 replacement quotes totaling $1,940. Pause here. If your skylight is over 7 years old and you've never resealed it, you now have a 67% probability that the original sealant has already failed. Not might have failed, has failed. The data says so. Hit like if this is the first time you've heard that skylights need maintenance, not replacement. Comment with your skylight age. If it's over 7 years, I'll tell you exactly where the failure is most likely to be. Real limitation, butyl sealant at the frame perimeter repairs interface sealant failure. It does not repair a cracked or broken glass unit, a damaged frame curb from physical impact, or a skylight where the metal collar integrated into the roof deck around the frame base has separated or corroded. If water entry continues after resealing the perimeter, the flashing assembly requires inspection. That inspection is a ladder and flashlight task, not a $1,200 contractor call. If the flashing metal is intact and flat against the surrounding roof surface, it is not the failure point. If the flashing is lifting, corroded, or showing gaps at the lap joints, professional assessment is warranted. The sequence: reseal the frame perimeter first. If staining persists, inspect the flashing. If flashing is intact, inspect the glass edge seals. If all 3 are intact and staining persists, the water pathway is elsewhere, and a contractor inspection makes sense. That diagnostic sequence costs you $9 and a Saturday morning before you spend $1,200. Florentine Cathedral maintenance workers were resealing the Duomo lantern frame with lime oil putty in the 1490s on a recurring schedule. Not as emergency response, but as preventive maintenance that protected a 30-year-old glazed frame from water infiltration. A homeowner in Austin resolved 2 seasons of recurring sealing staining with $9 of butyl rubber against 2 replacement quotes, totaling $1,940. The sealant on your skylight frame right now is degrading on a UV timeline that started the day it was installed. The $6 tube stops that timeline. The replacement industry's $1,200 invoice depends on you finding out about the tube after the sealing stains, not before. The tube is at the hardware store. Check your skylight frame this weekend. If this vault opens something for you, subscribe and share it with any homeowner who has a skylight over 7 years old. Every share puts a $6 solution in the hands of someone the skylight replacement industry was counting on staying uninformed. Comment with your skylight age. I'll tell you how urgent this is. The next vault opens soon, and what is buried inside goes even